Good morning. Welcome to Navigation Church. For those joining us on our online campus, we're so excited that you're with us. And as a reminder, every single week, as well as everyone with us live, make sure to download our app. You can always get today's sermon notes in that, as well as have the latest up-to-date information about the church, how to be able to connect with us, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Just go download it. Okay, so here's what we're doing right now. We're having a conversation about a man named Jesus. Boom. That's it. Welcome to church. Jesus Christ is who we are talking about. Christ isn't his last name. It's a title. We'll cover that weeks from now. But for right now, we're just talking about the Jesus, his life, and different stories. Last week, we actually started a conversation on the disciples, and I'm going to kind of continue that of what it looks like and what it means to be a disciple. And when it comes to disciples, in case you don't know, there were small business owners that joined Jesus. There was some IRS agents that joined Jesus. If you don't know what IRS agents are, they're tax collectors. Okay, all of you do know if you get a paycheck. So there were some patriots, some radical zealots would be another name for it. There were men and women. Wow, I thought I'd get a little bit of amen on that, because some people think that if you're like female, you're not allowed to preach the gospel, but listen to last week's podcast and you'll find out that God isn't gender specific. Like he cares about both male and female, so there are men and women. Man, I really felt like I gave you a good run at that a second time, but okay, well, men, glad you're here. Okay, here we go. So there were some blue-collar workers, but men, I love you. I heard it, and I appreciate that. There were some blue-collar worker, white-collar workers. There were educated and not so educated, and so chances are you fall into one of those categories. And so if you are any of those things, you are actually qualified to follow Jesus Christ. But before I jump into that, I just kind of need to tell you where I'm at today. One, I can tell you this, I'm very excited about this sermon because I had a real life experience just 2 days ago that proved to me what I had to say to you today was correct. So I'm excited about that. But then the other thing I just need to kind of tell you, I'm borderline exhausted. So I tell you that for a couple reasons. One, if my voice sounds weak, that's why. But also number two, when I get real tired, I can't always control what comes out of my mouth. So you just need to be warned. My goal is not to offend anybody or say anything appropriate. But I don't know. As the day goes on, I just won't make those promises. But so here's kind of where I'm at this week. And some of it is emotional. Some of it may be funny. But last Sunday, I don't know if you know, I wasn't available to be here because I had the opportunity to go down and be at another church. How many have ever heard of Bolivar, Missouri? Okay, like 8 of you. Wonderful. Well, let's try this one. Ash Groves. That's where I preach. I preached in this little one-bedroom house right next to a cemetery. And you're wondering, no one got up. I wasn't that good. But I was in this very, at best the town had about 800 people, but the church had over 100. So this is called a mega church. I don't care what statistics you go by. It was fantastic. So I had 2 sermons that morning that I had to do, but then I was actually kicking off that conference that night. And by the way, anytime you're preaching somewhere else, it's a little more difficult because people don't know you. You don't know them, they don't know you. Here, I'm the house band. Right? Like you know what to come to expect kind of week in and week out. And so it's comfortable. I know jokes that I can use, can't use, things like that. Down there, it's a little different. So there's kind of I don't want to use the word stress, but there's a pressure of, am I going to be able to connect with them? And then, what I have to say, is that any good? And you don't know till afterwards, and it's too late at that point. So in this one Sunday, in 2 different groups that I have no idea who they are, I had these multiple sermons. But at 6:30 in the morning, I got a phone call from my wife that her grandma passed away. Amazing woman of God. She's been in my life for nearly 20 years. And now I hear my wife at home by herself with the kids that she needs to get out of the house to come to church she was serving last week in one of the areas. And as a husband, I can't do anything for her. And so I actually said to her, I said, I hope you're okay with this. I have to put this whole conversation on pause in my life because I can't do anything about it. I have to be focused here. And so going throughout the day, end up doing that. The conference there released me to come home early, so I drove all the way home at the speed limit. No, it wasn't. And so drove all the way home. And basically, I got about an hour with my wife, and then I had to go into full-time dad mode. I somehow have 4 children, but they have to be in 19 places at one time. And so I'm in full dad mode. We're helping do the funeral the next day. Then I have to do everything in my life to get ready for work here for the week. But I have one day to do a week's worth of work because starting on Thursday, I don't know if you guys know this, but we help throw a huge party in town called Italian Fest. I help do site. I'm looking at a couple people around the room right now that was up there at 12:30. I about 12:30 saw him last night up there. And so we're doing all these things, and in the middle of all that, I get another phone call that a dear friend of ours, usually stands right there, passed away. And officially, you would say it's the first death in our family of COVID. And so we have all these things happening, not to mention the additional phone calls that I'm getting of just, hey, can we meet? Is there something we can talk about? And truth be told, I was just plumb tired. And on Friday, after being at the Italian Fest, to run home to change clothes in time to do a wedding over at Tower Grove Park, to then drive back to pick up my son to take him all the way to Fenton for a soccer game. And you always try to say, this is just me, you sit away from the rest of the families because you just don't feel like talking at that point. But if you're there first, the rest of the families go, oh, I guess this is where we're sitting. And then you're like, oh, you're okay. So like, Jesus loves you, I'm just annoyed with you. So like, I'm sitting there, that's what I'm thinking, not what I said. So then I drove home, and by the way, I do have a point, and here it comes, ready? So I drive home, and I say to Silas, they won that game that night, and I said, buddy, let's just get some food, we'll get home. So White Castle's line was too long. If my wife's not with me, that's where I was gonna go. So we pull into Popeyes, which is the best chicken sandwich, bar none, hands down, like fantastic. It's better than that Chick-fil of nothing, like, cause they don't even, I mean, their bun's bigger than their chicken. They don't put toppings on, and spicy isn't spicy. And if you love it cause you're a Christian, good for you. But Popeyes is better. So, in my humble opinion. So we drive in there, and this is just kind of who I am as a person. So the lady opens up, and I'm getting the change, and I'm handing her the money. And I said, hey, how are you doing tonight? And she goes, I'm not having that good of a night. And I said, I am so sorry to hear that. I go, what's going on? And she just talked to me for a second, and she went and put the money, and she came back out the window, and so this is apparently the window now, and she goes, thank you so much for asking me. How is your night going? And I wanted to go, oh, I can top you. I got 2 deaths. Apparently, sinuses are showing up this year in a way that never has before. I'm absolutely exhausted. My wife still hasn't had time to grieve because we had amazing, if you were here, an amazing women's ministry that happened over the last couple days. And here's what I said. I said, well, I'm having a fantastic evening. I said, my son just won his soccer game. We're now buying the world's greatest chicken sandwich. We're going to go eat junk food and go to sleep. Which, by the way, is all factually true. But the truth is, it was anything but that. But in that moment where she was, I just, like, life can be better. So we talked for a second longer. She closes the window, they come back out, the manager comes over, and my first thought was, what did I do wrong? And the manager goes, hey, I heard your boy won his soccer game tonight. Buddy, I put a piece of cake in there for you. Silas was through the roof, and I was through the roof because both of us had the same thought. They just gave me cake. And so we arm wrestled. He won. He got it. He's a jacked up kid, a lot of steroids. So, and healthy. Doctor oversees it. So, I was so excited. You remember when I said, I was tired? I'm like 4 minutes in, and it's already there. So let's see if we can kind of wrangle this back in. So we pull away, and Silas was like, this is awesome. I got free cake. And I said, this was awesome, Silas, because this wasn't what I was in the mood for. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, Si, just put it down for a second. We don't have to look at the cake. I want to tell you what just happened. I said, I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I said, buddy, I barely wanted to do your game tonight. And I'm doubly exhausted. He's not here. Okay. The kid asked more questions than any person in the history of the universe. He talks all the way home about weird things, and he never stops talking. And it's like he took a straw and shoved it into my soul and just sucked out. You know, moms, you're with me, right? Just sucked, that's a twins mom talking to me right there. Just sucked the life out of me. And it was like I was inverting into my bones. And so I'm exhausted from him, but I can't tell him that because he won't listen to this podcast. And I said, buddy, do you understand the one thing that I know I do is I actually care about other people. And at this moment that I didn't want to care about someone else and I just wanted to go home and I want to eat the greatest spicy chicken sandwich, and if you're not hungry yet, I apologize, I'm done with it. And I said, but here was a time that I just dropped a net out. It was a small step, but Silas, by the end of it, we gave them the opportunity to give to us because we apparently gave something back to them. And it was the smallest step possible. And Silas, with his genuine heart, and he's just such a caring, tending person, his eyes are wide and he looked right at me and he goes, so do I get the cake? So I made a note, share it on Sunday mornings, and maybe someone else will get it. And so here's what I want to tell you. I believe that what I have to share to you is this. There's times in our life that God's just calling us to do this simple step. If you feel like you have the pressure of life on your shoulders to change the world, can I just take that God complex off of you right now? It is God's job to change the world. But he partners with us where you are and what you do and how you do it and the small things of life, not to change society, but to change one person in a drive-thru when you said, how's your night? And I genuinely, empathetically cared in that moment. And so what I want to do is I want to journey you. I want to ask you to let Jesus be your guide. And when I say I want to ask Jesus to be your guide, I'm going to tell you this, that I think your thought of following Jesus may be just a little bit wrong. I don't want to try to offend you. I'm not trying to offend you. But your concept. And here's what I think most of our concepts is, and we're going to jump right now. In Matthew chapter 4, I think this is what most of our concepts are. Matthew chapter 4, it says, as Jesus was just walking by the Sea of Galilee, he had nothing better to do that day. He's just walking by the Sea of Galilee, and yes, his arms are up because he's getting his steps in, right? He's walking by the Sea of Galilee. He saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting their net into the lake, for they were fishermen. It's kind of what you do. And out of nowhere, Jesus says to them, come follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people. And at once, because of this one simple call that Jesus threw out there, they immediately just dropped their nets and went to follow him. Like, this is our concept, right? And at once they dropped their nets and followed. And going on from there, they saw two other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in their boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. And Jesus called to them. And immediately they left their boat, they left their dad, they left their mom, they left their business, they left everything they worked for, just because this random guy walking down the seashore said this, hey, come follow me. And if you're honest with yourself right now, if some dude walked by and you were in your family business for a generation and dad has been raising you up because the day that he retires, you're going to take over the family business. But since there wasn't Roth IRAs at that time, you would actually also need to make enough income to take care of your mom and dad. So instead of you doing everything that you've been trained for, you abandon the retirement. You abandon the family business. You abandon that legacy. And I think most of us would say this, how irresponsible, right? Am I way off on that? You would say how irresponsible for them just to leave and follow Jesus. Because after all, if he isn't Lord of all, he's not Lord at all, right? Let's say it this way. You need to follow Jesus even if it's blind faith. If you have a religious person say, just do it because I said so, that I'm going to tell you now, you are not going to find that in the Bible. And here's the thing that I maybe am going to challenge your belief system a little bit. I believe when it comes to following Jesus, it actually starts with information and not faith. And actually, I'd go as far as to say this. Most of the time, our information then just turns to illumination. Like we hear the data that's come in our head, but now it's kind of illuminated us and it's made us think differently. And man, how is this something I believe in? Is this something that I can grab a hold of? But then that information that went to illumination turns to a personal revelation. Now this is when I own the data that was originally gave to me, and it isn't just head knowledge, but it's a heart attitude. And eventually, ideally, which what we'll even see with all these different disciples, that information that became illumination, that moved to a personal revelation, was the realization that they need to share something. What do they need to share? The original information that they were given. But that's called faith. but it starts with information. And so today, I don't think I've ever started a sermon by this. You need to follow Jesus. You need to follow Jesus. You need to follow Jesus. Because you would go, what does that mean? Well, let me give you some information on it. So Matthew's great. Matthew was a fisherman, not highly educated, but by the way, in Matthew, he made sure to record that there was a scribe that came to Jesus and said, hey, I'm going to start following you around and writing down everything. So this non-educated fisherman had someone dictating things for him. And in his writings, he's writing to a Jewish people and he's giving highlights. But along comes a guy named Luke, who's an historian. And I love Luke because Luke gives us a lot more information that we wouldn't have got any other way. So here's what we're going to do. Let's read that story again, but let's add on all of Luke's detail that Matthew somewhat left out. So we're going to go now to, if you don't know where we're at, we're going to be in Luke chapter 4. Jesus had this amazing time where he went down and got baptized. After he got baptized, he went for 40 days in the wilderness to war with the enemy, war with the deceiver, war with Satan. Yes, I use that word and it's okay. War with him. To then come out of the wilderness and kind of begin a ministry. He turned some water into wine. He was preaching in a synagogue. And this is where we pick up in Luke chapter 4, verse 38. Now, Jesus left the synagogue. What synagogue? The one he was just sitting around and talking. And he went home to the home of Simon. So how did he know Simon? Well, there's a really good chance that Jesus, like on a day like this, Jesus is up there. I'm not calling myself Jesus right now. A couple of you relax. There's no cape underneath this jacket, right? Okay, so Jesus is sitting there talking and he's preaching in the synagogue. And there's a guy over here named Simon Peter, by the way. And Simon Peter liked him so much that afterwards he came up and was like, listen, what's your Twitter handle? I really want to follow you. You're a big deal. Like, I'd love to become a partner of your ministry. And Jesus and Simon started talking a little bit. And Simon said, listen, I don't know what you have plans for dinner tonight, but do you want to come to my house? So Simon was sitting in a place where he's already heard Jesus talking for a while. Now, Simon's mother-in-law was suffering from a high fever, and they asked Jesus to help her. So now, here's something interesting. Did Simon ask Jesus to his house because he thought Jesus was hungry? Or did Simon ask Jesus to his house because he knew the miracles that Jesus is already performing and Simon had some selfish motives? I mean, he must have loved his mother-in-law. I'm not going to do those jokes. I'm not. Wow. Yeah, wow's right. But if I was going to do those jokes, they would sound something like this. No. So Simon had this mother-in-law that he could tolerate, and so all of a sudden he... It's like okay. I can't help it, and everything inside of me has two more that are so inappropriate. They're like... Just read the scripture. Here we go. They're helping me preach today. Here we go. So Jesus said, can you come help her? So he bent over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. She got up at once and began to wait on them. Good mother-in-law. And so at sunset then, this is a huge deal. Jesus just healed on the Sabbath. Because at this time, at Sabbath time, you're not supposed to be doing any work. And apparently healing someone who's about to die is considered work. So Jesus probably sat around and said, listen guys, don't make a big deal of this. We were here in the house. She got prayed for. She's better. We're all working. We're having dinner now. Just relax. But enough people kind of started scampering around that by the time sunset hit, you have all these other people being brought to Jesus with various kinds of sickness, and he began laying hands on them because, listen, I know you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, but clearly you did, but now we're out of Sabbath, and I'm really sick. Can you heal us? So now Simon Peter at his house is watching a tent revival, right? And so we have to see this. So now we're going to jump. This was Luke chapter 4, and we're going to jump to Luke chapter 5. But I need you to do me one big favor today. We're going to talk about Jesus going into Peter's boat and Peter casting down some nets. And immediately when I say that, because a lot of you in here are Bible thumpers, I know you are, you've been doing this for a while. Can you do me a favor? Don't jump ahead in the story. Let's sit around as if we're someone on the bank watching all of this unfold and be lost in the moment of this master guide, this master Jesus leading someone into a relationship to follow him. Because now, one day, so sometime later, Jesus is standing on the lake where Peter's fishing. And Peter had to recognize him because he healed my mother-in-law. I fed him the food, and we had a massive miracle service at my house. And so Jesus and the people were crowding around Jesus to listen to him, and Jesus is backing up because the crowd's getting bigger and bigger, and he's kind of shouting out, and next thing you know, his heels are on the lake, and there at the water's edge, there were two boats left there by fishermen who were busy washing their nets. So he gets in one of the boats in order to gain a little more distance to the crowd so that they could hear him. And by the way, the one boat that he just happened to step into was a guy named Simon. And he steps in and he asks him, hey, can you put us out just a little bit from the shore? Like, something amazing is going to happen. People won't keep pressing on me, but now being on the water, I'll get a little more amplification out of my voice. Can you just kind of push us around? And there he sat down and just taught the people. And so it's interesting because you have to, again, don't jump ahead. Stay with me right here. You have Simon Peter and all of his employees sitting there washing their nets. What this means is they've been out all night long, because on this lake, what would happen during the day, sun comes out, water gets hot, fish go down. At night, when the water's cool, the fish come up towards the top in order to feed, so the fishermen would fish all night long. At the end of that night, they get out, and if you've ever been fishing with more than like 2 poles, you know how all the string gets all wrapped up? Yeah, so they have these nets, there's probably holes in them, they've probably caught debris, plastic bottles, like they had to get all this stuff out. So when it says that they were clean, it's horrible. Like it's been, okay. So they're sitting there, they're mending their nets, they're finishing their work day, and they're cleaning and clocking out for the day in order for their nets to be ready for the next time. Jesus climbs in a boat and goes, hey buddy, can you just push me a little bit away? And they're like, listen, we just finished getting our radio and our beer cans out. Like, we're done with the night. Do we really have to do this? Just let me talk to the people a little bit. And so they push out a little bit from the shore. And then when he finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into the deep water and let your nets down for a catch. So now you have Simon sitting there going, hey. Then this is my story. You don't have to believe Peter did this, but when you read about Peter's like really short fuse, I'm thinking I'm pretty close here. Hey, no offense, carpenter boy, but you're not a fisherman. And I had just finished doing all my cleaning. We just finished unloading. We're exhausted. And don't take this wrong, because sometimes when God asks you to do this, you know you think about this way. Like, there's a whole crowd of people there. And everyone knows you don't fish during the day. And I'm going to look really stupid starting to throw my nets overboard. And by the time we get them back up, take them back in and wash them, I'm probably not going to catch anything. I'm going to be doubly exhausted. So I'm going to lose energy. I'm probably going to lose money. And there's a chance I'm going to lose a little bit of my reputation. But hang on, see, you're jumping ahead of the story again. Get back here with me. If you were the fisherman, you've watched Deadliest Catch on Discovery Channel. How do you think those fishermen were wanting to talk to him at this point? Not like that. Thank you very much. Like we're sitting there, and you don't know our business whatsoever, but you're wanting me to do this. And so Simon said, hey, master, which, by the way, kind of an odd title to say here because he wasn't a servant to him, but this title was just one of respect. He said, master, like, we've worked all hard all night, and we haven't caught anything. Like, we've been out here doing what we know to do, how we've always done it for generations. But then Simon Peter says something very interesting. He then says this, but because you say so. But because you say so, we let down our nets. Because you say so, I'll go, hey, how's your night going here at Popeyes? Because you said so, I'll make the extra text to go, listen, I'm praying for your family during your loss right now. Because you said so, the only thing in my hand that I know to do, I will respond properly when you call me to do something that I don't feel comfortable doing, or can I tell you that I'm exhausted to do, or it may cost me some money, or it may cost me a little bit of reputation. See, we think blind faith is this. Just do it because Jesus said so. At this point, there is no more blind faith. He's heard him preach. He's watched a miracle of his mother-in-law, a miracle of his community. And what Jesus is saying to him, I want you to be a follower of me, but being a follower of me doesn't mean you don't have to be, or that you have to be ignorant of me. Being a follower of me is, are you willing to do the next small step that I've called you to do? And his response should be our response of this. Hey, God, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. But because you say so. And you don't think they made eye contact? Man, if he healed her, maybe he can kill us. Like you don't think, by the way, if you've ever had doubt in your Christian life and you think God's mad at you, I challenge that thinking. I challenge that thinking. Because I can't imagine they had to, I don't think they were like, hey guys, you want to do that song we do every time? Hey, I don't have a song for you. I got to be honest with you. I was hoping one would like pop up. Ho, hee, ho, ho. Is that Wizard of Oz? Let's just go with that. I was thinking the Seven Dwarfs, but honest God, I think they just whistled, right? It doesn't matter. We're moving on. And so, I will let down my nets, because here's what we have to understand when Peter's grabbing these things. When we're sitting at the store, when we're having a conversation with the friend, when we're exhausted, Peter had no idea what laid in the balance by him grabbing his nets. When you have a moment in your life when God's calling you to do something, you have no idea what lays in the balance of you grabbing that net. And it's not the big steps, it's the small one. It's when God said, listen, any chance you'll start waking up 15 minutes early before getting ready to work just to spend time with me, and you're going to be tired, and you're going to be exhausted, and you're going to start justifying it. But what he's asking is, will you grab the net at your hand because I said so? Are you willing to take this one more step just because I said so? And here's what you're thinking. In your head, you're going, I might catch a fish, or I might have a prayer answered, or I might quit this thing that I've been wanting to quit. You may think it, but I'm here to tell you now, you have no idea what lays in the balance of you just being obedient. What does it mean to be a follower of Jesus Christ? It's doing the small things because he said so, even when you don't know what lies in the balance. And so when they had done so, I love this, by the way, not when your attitude was right, not when you prayed about it, not when you sought counsel for 20 of your friends, not when you had a full understanding because of the information to illumination to revelation to realization, not when you had all that. When you were obedient, as soon as they had done so, they had caught such a large number of fish. By the way, you don't know the story. You're sitting in the boat. And by the way, do you think Jesus is helping throw the net at this point? No. I don't think so either. Do you think Jesus is sitting there, twiddling his thumb, just thinking about, I think I'm going to do Popeyes for lunch? Do you think Jesus is thinking about his next sermon? Do you think Jesus has a small little smirk on his face? They're going, dude, this is going to blow them away. You know, it's like Christmas time. Like, you know what's inside the present, but the kids don't know what's inside in the present. And they just open socks, so they have no expectations of what this might actually be. You think Jesus has his feet out, leaning back? You think Jesus has poker face, going, I'm not going to give you a leaning one way or the other. And they're looking at him, he's looking at them, they're picking up nets. And as soon as, wait, you just had me go out to the deep. But this here says, as soon as they had done so, such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. Wait a second, their nets shouldn't have been breaking. Why do I say that? They just spent all morning mending it. And this morning, as I'm driving a kid to drop him off at a soccer field with no adult supervision for the next 2.5 hours by himself. Yep, that's what kind of dad and just life that we're living right now. I looked right at Gideon and I said this. I said, Gideon, the best work they could have done didn't compare to the single act that Jesus wanted to do for them. They had their nets ready. They had them prepped. They were used to a certain amount of fish. But because they did it, because he said so, God had such a blessing that their natural ability could not contain what God had for them. Either clap or don't. That was half. Let's go ahead and put your hands together. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. We cannot understand the blessing that God has for us when we simply say yes to the small things in front of us. And when Simon Peter saw this, he said to Jesus, I want to make you immediately a 30% partner. And I'll offer you a 10-year contract if you'll just get in my boat every single day. Now, I will have you sign a non-compete clause because there's some other guys up the road that we don't want anything to do with. And right now, there's somebody like watching online not following the notes, and you're thinking, that's really in the Bible? No, it's not. But isn't that what our mind might think? Like, oh my gosh, I've hit pay dirt. I won't have to work for weeks. How am I going to be able to get through all this work? Oh, and by the way, I'm the most popular fisherman on all the lake. Look at all the people out here seeing me. If they need a personal tour, if they want to go fishing themselves, I'll be the boat they charter. Like, this is things that we think we would be thinking about in this moment. Peter saw this, and he fell to his knees and said, go away from me. Ready for this? Lord. Wait, just a second ago, he called him master. But something happened. By saying yes, there was a shift with this new information that was found, and now I believe. Because of the information that you just downloaded, because of the truth that I saw of who you are, Lord, Creator. Listen, I don't know if you're God or not, which, by the way, he had no idea at this point, but I know this, that you are more than what those guys are at the temple wearing all white. And I don't know if you're some Old Testament prophet that we heard about, or a guy like John the Baptist, the last Old Testament prophet. I don't know, because I've watched him baptize people, but now I've heard you preach. I've watched your miracles, and now you've personally done something to me. I need to start calling you something different, because Lordy Lord. This is something blowing my mind. And he says this, go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinful man. You see, in this early Jewish time period, there was this mindset that God actually distanced himself from sinners. So if you were unclean, and you guys have probably heard this before, even if you're not a big church Bible believer, you've ever heard of these people with leprosy. They were unclean, so they had to be put out of community. There was a woman with an issue of blood, and she couldn't get to physicians. The reason why? Because of her uncleanness. She had to be put out of community. If you were a sinner, you were put out of community. Why? Because at that time period, which, by the way, I still believe today, that if you are a dirty sinner, God doesn't want to be anywhere around you until you get cleaned up. But Jesus is changing the narrative that we have to come to understand and believe ourselves today. Not only are you a dirty sinner, but I want to get in your boat and be close to you versus being distant from you. And being a sinner doesn't disqualify you from following Jesus. Actually, being a sinner is a prerequisite to following Jesus. If you're sitting here right now, if you're watching me online and you think, well, you don't know my past, I would say this, Jesus is drawing even closer to you because of it. If you knew my stories, you know that I'm no longer qualified because of my past, because of my beliefs, because of my hurts, because of my wounds. There's no way God would use someone like you. And I think Jesus would say this, your resume is better than the people who grew up in church with halos over their head, jumping pews, running aisles. Just get up and run them. I know you want to right now. Get up and run aisles, blowing shofars, throwing oil, dropping claws, doing prayer tunnels, God's saying, I love all those people that have loved me for their whole life. But for those of you that have been in the seas of life, coming up empty, with the past that seems desperate in the moment, Jesus is saying this: you are more qualified than you can possibly imagine to draw close to me. Amen. And because of the information that I'm going to keep giving to you about who I am, there will be a moment, though, that I say this: are you ready to drop your net? And you have to come to terms of this: I'm going to do it because you said so. Amen. And so if you're a new believer, it's time to say, because you said so. But by the way, for those of us that our relationship with Jesus Christ has grown stale, I have one prayer for you today. God, put them in a place where they have to do it because you said so. Because if you want your relationship to grow with Jesus Christ, there's going to always be the next time that you have to do it because he said so. And usually by doing so, you serve other people. He had more fish than he could do anything with. He had more of a haul than he could ever handle by himself. And so by nature, because of what Peter did in his own life, he was able to serve a whole lot of other people around him. And actually, you keep going on, for he and all his companions were astonished. By the way, do you remember the story that Matthew shared, that Jesus was walking down and said, hey, just follow me? And they were like, okay, we're going to follow you now. No. This is the whole story. So now his companions were astonished at the catch of the fish that they had taken. And so there were James and John. Oh, look at this. The sons of Zebedee. The one that Jesus randomly passed by, and they left their dad's business. Then Jesus said to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on, from now on, you will fish for people. So they pulled their boats up to shore, left everything to follow them. But by this point, I'm thinking you have a dad going, boys, you got to take advantage of this. I know kind of the mindset I've always given you. But I'm here testifying of the information that I've been seeing in my life. Sons, this isn't some radical blind faith, follow this guy who says something. I'm saying by all the data that I'm seeing, you have to go. You have to go. And Peter's little ask, you remember when I said Peter had no idea what hung in the balance of him making this decision? I'm going to say to you this. You don't know who hangs in the balance when you make your decision. If Peter would have said no, there would have been an entire shoreline of people that never would have seen this miracle. If Peter would have said no, would James and John ever joined in on this discipleship journey? You don't know who hangs in the balance when you do a simple yes. Let me hit pause here real quick. And this is going to feel like a commercial. And that's not my goal. Pre-COVID, we were growing at such a rapid rate that we were trying to figure out how to go to a third service. The amount of salvations we were seeing, the amount of people attending, and honestly, one of our major hiccups is the parking lot. Like, we were running out of parking spots before we were running out of, rears and seats. And so COVID hit, everything shifted. Now that we've been coming back in the state and the news and everybody, things are somewhat lifting as we're seeing. On a regular basis, now this morning, it's a little thinner than what we've been for the last 2 months. But we are once again saying, hey, we need to start moving back to 2 services in order to give more people a greater opportunity. But you know what? One of the major reasons why we haven't moved back to 2 services is because the amount of people that normally were volunteering just aren't volunteering here at church right now. So we have ushers that have been on for 3 weeks in a row. Coffee bar people that are there almost every week. Nav kids that are just ideally one time a month, but a little bit more. And we have an idea of when we would like to go back to 2 services, but it literally is contingent upon this. That are we willing to start serving others versus just coming and getting for ourselves? And so as a church, you should know over the next couple weeks, there's going to be calls going out to say, we need you to step up and begin serving in places. Because I will tell you now, and I'm going to almost prophetically declare this, by January, we're going to be making such announcements that it's all hands on deck in order to move to the future that God has for us. I believe that with everything inside of me, things that we've been fighting for years now. I believe the breakthrough is coming, and I'll even say it this way, in the next 30 days. But here's a question I have for you. And by the way, I know this sounds like a commercial, and it's not. It may sound like a huge recruitment time, but it's not. But I will say this, that if you get a phone call from someone, if you get an email from someone, if you get a text from someone, and they say this, hey, would you be willing to step up? Could you hear it as God saying, throw your net? Because you don't know what hangs in the balance, but I need to make it bigger than that. We don't know who hangs in the balance if we just become content sitting in our boat. And we can say something like this, well, we got Jesus here with us, but Jesus has a catch so much bigger than that. And you go, well, I'm not qualified to park a car or be an usher or be in the Nav Kids. And I would say this, God always puts us in a place where he takes who we are and makes small adjustments to make us what he wants us to become. He didn't say this to Peter. Peter, I'm going to have you start building bridges in the future. Well, I don't know how to build bridges. I'm going to make you an accountant and a businessman. Well, I don't know how to do this. Here's what he said to Peter. You've just had a radical transformation with me in this boat. Can I ask how many in here right now, show of hands, put your hands together, however you want to do it. How many of you can remember a moment that you had with Jesus that there was a radical transformation in your life? Okay. But then let me ask you this. Over the next 2, 4, 8 years, did you have another radical transformation? Or were there just small incremental changes that he kept bringing to your life? And so he leans into Peter and says this, listen, I'm going to make you a fisherman, but now you're just going to fish for men. And over this next 3-year journey, I'm going to show you what that looks like. Oh, and by the way, if you're sitting there going, well, I'm kind of questioning my faith right now. Yeah, so did Peter. Oh, yeah, so did every disciple by the end. Every sinner that followed Jesus before the end turned their back on him. But there was something that occurred. They had too much information about who he was to disqualify themselves long term. So if you're sitting here right now and you go, listen, I know there's something I need to do, then I'm telling you to do this. Do it because God said so. But if you're also sitting there right now and goes, well, I don't know what the practical step that I could take next is, I would say this, allow the church to partner with you. Do you realize the reason why we use partners here and not membership? Because a membership is something that you go to just to use what they have. I don't want to be a church that you just come and use what we have. Which, by the way, if that's who you've been, we do welcome you. We love you. But we want you here to get more information so that you can have an illumination in your life to live with the brand new revelation to eventually the realization that you should be sharing something else with other people. But I'm not your local gym where you can come in, sweat all over our machines, and walk out without wiping a thing down. That's what a membership buys you. The partnership is because I look around the room and I go, you have a qualification that I don't. And I want to partner with what God's doing in your life. You have a gift that I've never seen before. You've had experiences that I've never talked about before. You're sitting at home right now and you go, what can I do from home? You can moderate online. You can get on our online platforms and bless people. When they send in prayer requests, you can pray for them. All of us have something in our life that you're uniquely and succinctly made for. And God is coming to you today to say this, I need you to start letting down your nets because there's a fish, there's a harvest, there's a container that I can't control myself, but until you partner with me, you can't see the manifestation from me. So Peter reaches down, he drops his nets, and the moment we partner with God is the moment we see the fullness of God for our own lives. Are you ready for this? I'm going to go ahead and give you a spoiler now. I doubt Peter let all those fish go. When you partner, I'm going to spell ministry for you. And I did not make this up myself. This has been around forever. Ministry, W-O-R-K. But what's better in life? To build the biggest fishing ministry ever, where everyone knows your name, you have multiple chartered boats, you can take anyone out, you want marlins, you want red tips, you want tuna, like I can take you out to do all those things. And you die as a first century fisherman without anyone knowing your name. Or do you want to be the person? So I started this by telling you, Grandma passed away. We come in to do the funeral, and by the way, I think 2 funerals ago, there was about 15, 20 people there. I remember a couple funerals ago, there was 7 or 8. And normally, if you don't know this, the older the person gets, the fewer the people that come to the funeral, because most of their friends have died. Not at Grandma's funeral. Grandma's funeral started with the 75 plus just family. Because 7 children, correct? 40 plus grandchildren. Great grandchildren. And so there's this mass of people, and by the way, some of you came. They were concerned that there wasn't even enough chairs at this church. And here's what every person said. Grandma was a great CEO that was able to make a lot of money. Nope, that wasn't said. You know, Grandma cared more about her grass than she did care about any one of us, and the only thing she wanted to be was a famous fisherman. Nope, didn't say that. Here's what they said. Grandma invested in me. No matter how late the night was, there was one phrase always said, should I put on another pot of coffee? Because I'm willing to sit and keep letting out my net, because investing in people is the greatest investment you can ever do. So following Jesus means this, that you turn into an investor in others. But what does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus Christ? It means this, because the information that you get, not the blind faith that someone would call you to, but because of sitting around with him long enough, there will be a moment where he says something to you and your response needs to be this: I will do it because you said so. So God, I believe there's a lot of people around this room right now that is sitting in a boat with you. That their minds have been challenged. Their belief has maybe been altered, or at least they're inquisitive of what they've always thought about who you were and following you meant. But I would hate that at the end of our life that we would pass away never of dropping our nets. But may we take what Peter did and learn from it, because Peter died with nothing at the end of his life, but that includes regret also. May we be a people that if we die with nothing, including regret, it was worth it because we dropped our nets. I pray for those that have been around the faith for a while and you know the songs and you're used to the rhythm, and you know in a minute Pastor Aaron will be back up here and this is the close of service and all those kind of things. I pray we become uncomfortable with our Christianity because our boat has been too at ease, and on this day, God, we begin grabbing our net just waiting for you to say it. Shake up our faith, shake up our belief, shake up our comfort, and let us start dropping the nets. And Lord, we don't know what hangs in the balance, but more importantly than that, we don't know who hangs in the balance. Shake up our faith this day, God. If you have your eyes closed, could I just ask you to keep your eyes closed 1 minute longer, because I have a question for maybe one person, maybe a handful of you, somebody you've joined us online. Maybe today you heard brand new information about who Jesus Christ is. I have a question for you. Are you willing to follow him? He's sat in your boat long enough. You've seen enough miracles. You've watched stories about him. But you yourself have never taken the step to say, I want to be a follower of Jesus Christ. If you're here today, the scriptures tell us this. If you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth, you're saved. So in a moment, I'm going to ask everyone to pray with you. You won't be singled out. But I do need to know, do you believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is here to save you? And with all eyes closed and head bowed, no one's looking around. It's just you and I talking. If you're here right now and you're ready to say yes to a growing relationship with Jesus Christ, could I just ask you to slip your hand up in the air just so that I can see you make that decision? And if you're watching us online, I see those hands going up. If you're watching us online, that same question is going to go out to you today. But instead of raising your hand, there's going to be a comment that gets in the section, a tab on one platform. They'll just come up to say, did you say that prayer today? Make sure to click yes on that. But we want to be able to celebrate with you like we are the people around this room. So could I just ask everybody today to say this? Dear Jesus, you've been in my boat long enough. I've heard about you and everything I need to know. I'm making the decision to follow you. Become Lord of my life. Forgive me of my sins. And from this day forward, call me your son. God, I thank you for every decision that was made, every hand that went up, every prayer that was said from the inside out. And today, God, we, along with all of heaven, rejoice. Now, for those that said yes for the first time, or maybe it's been a long time, all of us today, with the confession of our mouth, we say this, yes, because you said so. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Come on, put your hands together. Let's celebrate with those that have made that decision.